Deep in the Thai jungle, what looks like a peaceful railway was built in 1942 by Imperial Japan, faster than experts thought possible, and at a cost of over 100,000 lives in just 16 months. Known to survivors and historians as the Death Railway, it was carved through rock and monsoon by men armed with little more than starvation rations and desperation. Why did Japan gamble everything on this impossible line? And how did a supply crisis lead the world into one of history's deadliest construction drives? By the spring of 1942, Japan's military supply lines in Southeast Asia were unraveling. Allied submarines and aircraft prowled the waters from Singapore to Rangoon, sinking Japanese merchant ships at a rate that stunned imperial planners. In just the first half of 1942, over a quarter of Japan's pre-war merchant fleet had been lost. More than 650,000 tons of shipping vanished beneath the waves. Each month, tonnage figures dropped further, with some convoys losing up to 30% of their cargo before reaching Burma. Oil, ammunition, and rations meant for frontline troops simply never arrived. The Battle of Midway in June 1942 tipped the balance. The Navy could no longer guarantee safe passage through the Malacca Strait or the Andaman Sea. Army staff calculated that their garrisons in Burma needed at least 1,000 tons of supplies delivered daily, but the sea routes were only providing half that, sometimes less. Facing what their own war diaries called strangulation, the Imperial General Headquarters issued a new order in June 1942 to build a railway from Thailand to Burma, no matter the cost. The target was set at moving 3,000 tons a day by rail, enough to support a renewed offensive toward India. Approval papers moved quickly through Tokyo. The plan was to lay more than 400 kilometers of track through some of the world's harshest terrain, faster than any engineer thought possible. The decision was made. Now, the only thing standing in the way was the land itself. So how would they cross it? Survey teams arrived in the borderlands between Thailand and Burma and found themselves hemmed in by a wall of green. The jungle here pressed close, thick with bamboo and tangled vines, blocking out sunlight even at midday. Underfoot the ground sloped sharply, giving way to steep ravines and sudden cliffs of hard quartzite rock. Rainfall pounded the region from May through October, turning narrow trails into rivers of mud and swelling streams into torrents. Floodwaters could rise overnight, washing away any attempt at a road or embankment. Surveyor notes from 1942 describe days lost to landslides and bridges swept downstream before the first rails even arrived. The planned route demanded more than 600 river and stream crossings, each one a potential choke point. In some places, the track would have to be carved straight through solid rock, with only hand tools available. Heavy machinery, already scarce, could not be hauled into the jungle. Every kilometer meant a new obstacle. Dense forest, leeches, mosquitoes, and mountains that offered no easy passage. Japanese engineers had estimated 5 years for the work. The order from Tokyo allowed just over 12 months. The land itself had defeated earlier British efforts, leaving behind only faded maps and abandoned survey markers. Now the challenge was to cut a railway through this barrier, fast and at any cost. So how could engineers and commanders hope to force a line through this terrain on that timetable? To fill the ranks for the railway, Japanese authorities turned to mass recruitment on a scale never seen before in Southeast Asia. The workforce would reach staggering numbers. About 60,000 Allied prisoners of war, British, Australian, Dutch and Americans, shipped in from camps such as Changi in Singapore and from Java. But these soldiers were only a fraction of the human engine driving the project. Over 200,000 Asian civilians, known as Romusha, were also pressed into service. Many were Tamil and Malay men from Malaya, Burmese villagers, and Javanese labourers, gathered through a mix of promises, threats, and outright force. Recruitment agents promised steady wages and food to desperate families, but the reality was different. Contracts were written in languages most recruits could not read. Once loaded onto trains or trucks, there was no turning back. Many arrived at the jungle camps with only the clothes they wore, assigned to work crews based on strength or nationality. Allied prisoners of war were registered, counted, and given numbers. Asian conscripts, by contrast, often had no records at all, their names lost before the first swing of a pickaxe. A Tamil descendant in Kanchanaburi remembers, "My grandfather left for work, believing he would earn enough to feed his family. He never came home. He is buried somewhere along the tracks." Legal status divided the camps. Prisoners of war were nominally protected by international conventions, though in practice those protections meant little. Asian labourers, unrecognised by any treaty, faced the harsh treatment. The flow of new arrivals never stopped. Every train and boat brought more people to replace those who fell. So how did this mass recruitment happen, and what did it cost? Rice rations fell to just 200 grams a day, barely enough for survival, let alone heavy labour in the jungle. The rice was often weevil infested and sometimes mixed with a handful of watery vegetable stew. Meat and fruit were rare. Hunger gnawed at the men, draining strength from their bodies and hope from their minds. As malnutrition set in, immune systems collapsed. Malaria swept through the camps, carried by clouds of mosquitoes that thrived in the humid air. Cholera and dysentery followed, spreading quickly in the muddy, overcrowded barracks. Camp medical logs from 1943 show entire work crews reporting sick. At Hintok, more than half the men were unfit for duty during the monsoon. There were no real medicines. Quinine and antibiotics were almost never issued. Makeshift medical tents overflowed, with the sick lying side by side on bamboo slats, feverish and delirious. But the daily quotas did not change. Each man was expected to move earth, break rock, and lay track no matter his condition. Supervisors enforced targets with beatings and threats, driving even the weakest back to work. Those who could not stand were sometimes propped up by their friends, swinging pickaxes with trembling hands. The cycle was relentless. Hunger led to weakness, weakness to disease, disease to punishment and death. One British prisoner of war recalled that he watched the men disappear. One day they were there, the next gone. This downward spiral shaped every hour on the line, setting the stage for the deadliest months to come. In the summer of 1943, a single word echoed through the camps: Speedo. Japanese officers barked the order day and night, driving the workforce into a final punishing sprint. Shifts stretched to 18 hours with barely a pause between darkness and dawn. Sick and starving, men were forced out of medical tents and back onto the line. Work did not stop for rain, fever, or exhaustion. At Hintok and Konyu camps, casualty lists soared. Medical logs from August show entire work crews collapsing under the pressure. The death toll climbed sharply. Dozens were gone each week, many never recorded by name. The goal was simple: finish the railway before the monsoon ended. By October 17, 1943, the two sections met at Konkoita, deep in the Thai jungle. The last rails were hammered into place, but the cost was staggering. One Australian survivor remembered the night, 18 hours under torches. Mates vanished daily. The line was now complete, but the nightmare had not yet reached its most infamous point. Hellfire Pass cut through the Tenasserim Hills, a stretch of quartzite rock so hard it dulled tools within hours. Here the night belonged to the hammer and the torch. Hundreds of men, most barely able to stand, were driven into the cutting after sunset, ordered to keep working by the flicker of bamboo fires and kerosene lamps. The rock echoed with the sound of chisels and sledgehammers, each blow sending sparks into the humid dark. Shadows danced against the walls, making the gaunt figures look almost skeletal. The air was thick with dust and the smell of sweat and kerosene. For weeks, progress came inch by inch, every stone pried loose by hand. A British survivor later described it. The flames lit up faces so thin they looked like skulls. You would see men swinging picks until they collapsed, and the guards' torches moving like eyes in the dark. Today, the Hellfire Pass Memorial Walkway follows the old cutting. Visitors walk where men once worked themselves to the edge of death, the silence broken only by the wind. The pass endures as a place where memory clings to the rock, reminding all who visit how the railway was carved, not just through stone, but through human lives. Today, trains still cross these tracks. Tourists ride where forced labourers once fell. Each journey reminds us that infrastructure can outlast memory, but the human cost endures. If the scars fade, so do the warnings. That's why what happened here will always matter. Share your thoughts below.